Principal Martinez had no idea the janitor students bullied was America's most decorated living hero. Hey, Hidden Strength family! Drop a comment telling us which country you're watching from. And if stories about unsung heroes inspire you, smash that subscribe button to join our community. You know, we walk through our schools, our workplaces, our communities every day and barely notice the people who keep everything running. We make assumptions about their intelligence, their past, their worth based on the uniform they wear or the job they do. But what happened at Lincoln High School in Texas is about to completely change how you see the quiet heroes working right beside you. "Get out of my way, old man," shouted 17-year-old Derek Mason as he shoved past the school janitor in the hallway. "Don't you have some toilets to clean?" Frank Williams, 72 years old, steadied himself against his cleaning cart and watched Derek swagger away with his group of friends. With his gray hair, slight limp, and worn blue custodial uniform, Frank looked exactly like what the students expected from their school janitor, an old man doing a simple job because he wasn't smart enough for anything better. "Why doesn't he just retire already?" laughed Derek's girlfriend Ashley. "He's probably been mopping floors since before we were born." "Yeah," added Derek's friend Tommy. "Bet he never did anything important his whole life, just cleaning up after real people." Frank had been the head custodian at Lincoln High for 12 years. The students knew him as the quiet old man who unlocked the building at dawn, mopped their messes without complaint, and somehow always managed to fix whatever they broke. He rarely spoke beyond a polite "good morning" or "have a nice day." What none of them knew was that Frank Williams was the most decorated living Medal of Honor recipient in American history. The quiet janitor they mocked had single-handedly saved an entire platoon in Vietnam, survived 3 tours of duty, and carried more combat decorations than most generals. But Frank had never told anyone at the school about his military service. When Principal Martinez had interviewed him 12 years ago, Frank had simply said he was a retired maintenance worker and provided impeccable references from his previous jobs. He'd learned long ago that people treated him differently when they knew about the medals, and all he wanted was to work quietly and earn an honest living. In Frank's small apartment 2 miles from the school, there was no visible sign of his extraordinary military career. Simple furniture, a small television, a few photographs of landscapes. Nothing suggested that this modest living space belonged to one of America's greatest war heroes. But in the bedroom closet, carefully preserved in a fireproof safe, was Frank's real story. The Medal of Honor citation signed by the President. Silver stars, bronze stars with V for valor, Purple Hearts from 3 separate wounds, commendation letters from commanding officers calling him the bravest soldier I've ever served with. The centerpiece was a faded photograph from 1971, a young Sergeant Frank Williams, barely 20 years old, standing with the 7 men he'd saved during the Battle of Hill 875 in Vietnam. The photo was taken 3 days after Frank had charged alone through enemy machine gun fire to rescue wounded soldiers, holding off an entire North Vietnamese company for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. So why was this American hero now cleaning high school bathrooms? The answer lay in Frank's character, not his circumstances. After returning from Vietnam, Frank had struggled with what would later be diagnosed as PTSD. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the guilt of surviving when so many good soldiers hadn't. He'd tried college on the GI Bill but couldn't concentrate. He'd tried several different careers, but nothing felt meaningful after the intensity of combat. Frank found peace in simple work jobs where he could help people without recognition, where he could serve without the weight of expectations. He'd worked as a hospital janitor for 15 years, then a church maintenance man before finding his way to Lincoln High School. "I'm not running from my service," Frank had once told his only close friend, Vietnam veteran Jim Patterson. "I'm honoring it. Those boys I saved deserve to come home and live normal lives. I figure I should do the same." At Lincoln High, Frank took pride in maintaining a clean, safe environment for the students. He saw it as a continuation of his service protecting young people, keeping them safe, helping them succeed. The fact that they didn't respect him never bothered Frank. Respect had to be earned, and he'd rather earn it through his actions than his decorations. Every morning, Frank arrived at the school at 5:30 a.m. He'd unlock the building, turn on the lights, and begin his methodical inspection of every classroom, every hallway, every exit. It was a routine born from decades of military discipline, adapted to civilian life. The students and even some teachers saw Frank's thoroughness as the obsessiveness of an old man with nothing better to do. They didn't recognize it as the vigilance of someone trained to spot danger, someone who understood that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. "That old janitor checks everything twice," complained math teacher Mrs. Henderson. "The man spends 20 minutes just looking at door locks. It's excessive." What Mrs. Henderson didn't know was that Frank was conducting security assessments with the eye of someone who'd spent 3 years studying how enemies attacked defended positions. He noted which doors didn't lock properly, which windows could be easily breached, which areas of the school would be hardest to defend in an emergency. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Frank had learned in Vietnam that the time to think about security wasn't when you were under attack, but long before the enemy arrived. The students were particularly cruel to Frank. They saw him as an easy target, an old man who couldn't fight back, wouldn't report them, and probably deserved their disrespect anyway. "Hey, Janitor Frank," Derek would call out loudly in the cafeteria. "You missed a spot over here." Then he'd deliberately spill his drink on the floor and walk away laughing. Ashley would block Frank's path with her friends, forcing him to go around them. "Excuse me, we're talking here. Cleaning can wait." Tommy once kicked over Frank's mop bucket in the hallway, soaking Frank's shoes and creating a mess that took an hour to clean up. "Oops, sorry, old man. Guess you've got something to do now." Frank endured it all with quiet dignity. He'd face down enemy soldiers trying to kill him. He could handle teenagers trying to humiliate him. But sometimes, late at night in his apartment, Frank would look at the photograph of his fallen comrades and wonder if this was the life they died for him to live. "You deserve better than this," his friend Jim would tell him during their weekly coffee meetings. "Those kids have no idea who you are." "They know exactly who I am," Frank would reply. "I'm their janitor. That's enough." But Jim wasn't satisfied with that answer. "Frank, you're a Medal of Honor recipient. You saved 7 lives under fire. You survived 3 combat tours. Don't you think people should know that?" Frank would shake his head. "The medal isn't for other people to know about. It's for me to live up to." That Tuesday morning started like any other. Frank arrived early, began his routine inspection, and noticed immediately that something was wrong with the west exit door. The lock mechanism had been tampered with, not broken, but deliberately manipulated so it would appear locked while actually being unsecured. Frank's military instincts kicked in immediately. This wasn't vandalism or accident. Someone had specifically disabled this exit to create an unsecured entry point. In his years of combat experience, that usually meant someone was planning to use it. Frank checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. Students would start arriving in 30 minutes. He could report the door to Principal Martinez, but school administration moved slowly, and Frank's gut told him 30 minutes might be too long to wait. Instead, Frank did what he'd been trained to do. He prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. He conducted a full security sweep of the school, checking every door, every window, every possible entry point. What he found confirmed his fears. 3 other exits had been similarly compromised. Someone had systematically disabled the school's security system, creating multiple breach points while making everything appear normal. Frank had seen this kind of preparation before in Vietnam. When the enemy was planning a coordinated attack, Frank's hands were shaking slightly as he pulled out his cell phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Frank Williams at Lincoln High School. I need police response immediately. Someone has compromised our building security in a pattern consistent with preparation for an active threat. Sir, can you be more specific? Are you seeing an actual threat? Frank looked out the window and saw a van parked across the street that hadn't been there yesterday. 2 men sat inside, watching the school. His combat experience told him everything he needed to know. I'm a combat veteran. I'm seeing reconnaissance and preparation. Send units now. The 911 operator heard the authority in Frank's voice and dispatched units, but the estimated response time was 12 minutes. Frank knew that if he was right about what was happening, 12 minutes would be too late. Students were beginning to arrive. Frank watched Derek, Ashley, Tommy, and dozens of other kids walking through the front doors, laughing and talking, completely unaware that their school had been compromised. These were the children he'd been protecting for 12 years, and now they needed protection in a way he'd hoped would never come. Frank made a decision that drew on 47 years of military training and the instincts that had kept him alive through 3 combat tours. He activated the school's lockdown protocol from the main office, triggering alarms that immediately sealed all classroom doors and initiated emergency procedures. "Attention Lincoln High School," Frank announced over the PA system, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd commanded soldiers under fire. "This is not a drill. We are implementing immediate lockdown procedures. Students and staff, secure your positions and await further instructions." Principal Martinez came running to the office. "Frank, what are you doing? We don't have an actual emergency." "Ma'am, with respect, we do. Check the west exit door, the north corridor emergency exit, and the gymnasium rear entrance. Someone has compromised our security." As Principal Martinez went to check the doors, Frank continued his announcement. "This is Frank Williams speaking. Some of you know me as your janitor. What you don't know is that I'm a combat veteran, and I'm telling you that someone has systematically breached our school's security. Police are en route, but until they arrive, I need everyone to follow lockdown procedures exactly." Through the window, Frank saw the two men in the van talking rapidly on radios. Their body language had changed from casual observation to urgent communication. They knew their plan had been discovered. At 7:47 a.m., exactly as Frank had predicted, 3 armed individuals attempted to enter the school through the compromised exits. They found every door secured, every window locked, and every potential breach point monitored by cameras that Frank had redirected to the main office. The would-be attackers retreated to their vehicle just as the first police units arrived. Frank's early warning and security assessment had prevented what investigators would later determine was a planned mass shooting targeting the morning assembly. Derek, Ashley, Tommy, and 300 other students remained safely locked in their classrooms while police apprehended the suspects outside. What could have been Lincoln High School's worst tragedy became a story of prevention and preparedness. When the lockdown was lifted 2 hours later, Principal Martinez called Frank to the auditorium where students and staff had gathered for debriefing. "I want everyone to understand what happened here today," Principal Martinez announced. "Our custodian, Mr. Frank Williams, identified a security threat and implemented procedures that saved lives. His quick thinking and experience prevented a potential tragedy." The auditorium was silent. Students who had mocked Frank that very morning were staring at him with new understanding. Derek raised his hand tentatively. "Mr. Williams, how did you know what to look for?" Frank looked at the young man who had shoved him just hours earlier. "Son, I served 3 tours in Vietnam. I learned to recognize when someone was planning an attack." Ashley spoke up next, her voice smaller than usual. "You were in Vietnam? But you work as—" "I work as your janitor because I choose to," Frank said gently. "My job doesn't define my worth, just like your age doesn't define yours." Tommy, who had kicked over Frank's mop bucket the week before, stood up. "Mr. Williams, I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been really disrespectful." Frank nodded. "Apology accepted. But you don't owe me respect because of what I did 50 years ago. You owe everyone respect because that's how decent people treat each other." Principal Martinez wasn't finished. "Students, there's something else you need to know about Mr. Williams." She held up a folder she'd retrieved from Frank's employment file. "He is a Medal of Honor recipient, the highest military decoration our country can award. He earned it by saving 7 soldiers' lives under enemy fire." The auditorium erupted in gasps and whispers. Students looked at Frank with expressions ranging from amazement to shame. Frank stepped forward. "Principal Martinez, with respect, that's not why I did what I did today. I didn't protect you because of a medal I earned decades ago. I protected you because you're my students. This is my school, and keeping you safe is part of my job." Derek stood up, tears in his eyes. "Mr. Williams, I called you names. I pushed you around. I had no idea." "You had no idea because I never told you," Frank replied. "But that doesn't excuse treating anyone with disrespect. It just means you learned something today about making assumptions." The story of the janitor who prevented a school shooting made national news within hours. "Medal of Honor, hero working as school janitor saves students," was the headline across every major outlet. Frank found himself thrust into a spotlight he'd spent decades avoiding. Reporters wanted interviews, veterans organizations wanted to honor him, and suddenly everyone wanted to know why America's most decorated living hero was cleaning bathrooms. Frank's response was consistent in every interview. "I'm not a hero for being a janitor. I'm a janitor who happened to be a veteran. Both jobs are about serving others, and both are worth doing well." The students at Lincoln High were transformed by the experience. Derek organized a student committee to formally apologize to Frank and to educate their classmates about treating all school staff with respect. Mr. Williams taught us that you can't judge people by their job title, Derek told a local news reporter. He's been protecting us for 12 years, and we were too ignorant to see it. Ashley started a campaign to learn the names and stories of every staff member at the school. How many other people are we overlooking every day? How many heroes are we walking past without noticing? Tommy became one of Frank's most dedicated advocates, often helping him with maintenance tasks and asking to hear stories about his military service. Mr. Williams showed me that real strength is quiet, Tommy said. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He just did his job and protected people. The three attackers, when questioned by police, revealed they had been planning the assault for months. They had studied the school's routines, identified security weaknesses, and chosen their timing specifically to maximize casualties during the morning assembly. We never expected the janitor to be a problem, one attacker told investigators. He was just some old guy who cleaned bathrooms. We never thought he'd know anything about security. That assumption had saved hundreds of lives. Frank was invited to the White House to meet with the president and receive a presidential commendation for his civilian service. Standing in the Oval Office, Frank was asked what message he wanted to share with the American people. "Don't overlook the people who serve you every day," Frank said. The janitor, the cafeteria worker, the security guard, we all have stories. We all have value, and we all deserve your respect. You never know when you might need us. Lincoln High School established the Frank Williams Service Award, given annually to someone who exemplifies quiet leadership and dedication to others. The first recipient was Frank himself, though he tried to decline. "This award should go to someone who deserves recognition," Frank protested. "It is," Principal Martinez replied. "It's going to someone who spent 12 years earning it without asking for it." At the award ceremony, Frank's speech was characteristically brief. "I've learned that heroism isn't about the size of your actions. It's about the consistency of your character. Every day, you have a choice to serve others or serve yourself. Choose service." Today, Frank still works as head custodian at Lincoln High School. He's 73 now, still arrives early, still checks every door and window, still maintains the school with the pride of someone who understands that his work matters. The difference is that now students stop to talk with him, ask about his day, thank him for his service both military and civilian. They've learned to see him not as just the janitor, but as Mr. Williams, a man whose quiet strength has protected them in ways they never imagined. Derek, now a college freshman studying education, comes back to visit Frank regularly. "You changed my whole perspective on what it means to be important," Derek told him. "I want to be a teacher now, to serve others the way you taught me." Ashley is studying social work, inspired by Frank's example of quiet service. "He showed me that the most important work often happens without recognition," she says. Tommy joined the military after graduation, following Frank's example of service. "Mr. Williams taught me that protecting others is the highest calling," Tommy explains. Frank keeps the Medal of Honor in his closet, not because he's ashamed of it, but because he's learned that living up to it matters more than displaying it. Every day at Lincoln High School, he continues to earn the respect that was given to him 50 years ago on a battlefield in Vietnam. "The medal represents one day of my life when I did something extraordinary," Frank tells visitors who ask about his service. "But being your janitor represents 12 years of doing something ordinary extraordinarily well. Both matter." When asked if he has any regrets about his choice to work as a custodian instead of pursuing recognition for his military service, Frank's answer is always the same. "The greatest honor isn't the medal they give you. It's the trust people place in you every day. These students trust me to keep them safe, and I take that more seriously than any decoration." The old janitor they mocked turned out to be one of America's greatest heroes. But more importantly, he taught an entire school community that heroism comes in many forms, service takes many shapes, and the most important battles are often fought quietly by people whose strength comes not from recognition but from character. Frank Williams proved that you don't need to wear your medals for people to see your valor. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is choosing to serve others without expecting anything in return. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. Have you ever dismissed someone based on their job, only to discover their incredible hidden story? Frank's journey reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often in the most humble roles, quietly protecting and serving without asking for recognition. If this story inspired you to look beyond job titles and show respect to everyone who serves, share it with someone who needs this reminder. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments.